welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. Before we jump into game number 2 between Innovation and TY, I want to briefly remind you guys to please subscribe to our MLG Starcraft 2 YouTube channel, youtube.com/official MLGSC2. We have a ton of content there. If you ever miss any show, if you missed yesterday's Rules of Engagement, they've been uploaded 22 hours ago, so just an hour or two after the show. They're all there. If you missed any of the great qualifier for the Winter Championship matches, they're there as well. Innovation versus TY. The matches I'm going over right now, they're all uploaded on our YouTube channel if you want to see the matches themselves. Of course, if you're tuning in just for Rules of Engagement, the last series between Sulky and Last was actually a really fun series, and that'll be up on YouTube momentarily within an hour or two. So please feel free to subscribe to get updates about exactly what's going on the MLG Starcraft 2 YouTube, because we have a lot of content. And one thing that's important to know is that not only is there content from our shows we do, but we also put up bonus content, comment of the day. We only have 2 videos there. There's going to be more coming out at you. We also have highlights from the broadcast. There's going to be and also top 10s and top 5s. Those are all going to start cranking out. So if you want to check out those, they're very brief videos. You know, you're taking a break from work. Your job is kind of working you down. You need a 5-minute excitement refresher. Check out some top 5 videos. As they're short, they're sweet, they're awesome. A lot of explosions. You know what? I love explosions. So go ahead and subscribe to that. YouTube.com/official MLGSC2. But now let's jump into the next game, which is going to be game number 2 between between Innovation and TY. So let me get that going. And a couple things we're going to look at here is the new Reaper as an opening. We saw that in this last series, actually, how cool it was against Zerg. We're going to see how effective is it against Terran and Terran Mirror. Then we're going to take a look at a couple tools to prevent Hellbat drops, because, of course, last game it seemed they were almost unstoppable. And then we're going to talk about what to do if you can't prevent the drop if the Hellbats get in your line, how you can scramble to defend against Hellbats in a tough situation. So we'll jump into the game pretty early and take a look at how Reapers open up. So if we look here, we're going to see TY is opening with a proxy barracks and constructing those Reapers. And one thing to note about the new Reaper, this first Reaper is already here, is that without the bonus damage versus light, it's at least in TVT with Marines able to have range damage, unlike against Zerg, which has no effective way to push those Reapers out early. The Reaper is really primarily a scouting unit. Not to mention, in fact, Terran has Hellions, which can run down a Reaper, so even though it regenerates, they can run it down. It's primarily a scouting unit. And so it might only be worth making one of these. We can see here, the first Reaper paid off massively. He knows his opponent's going double gas. He knows his opponent's getting a factory and a reactor. He can be pretty sure his opponent's going Hellbat drop. Now, maybe he could have been confident of that at the start of the game because it's Terran. But at least this way, he's absolutely sure, and without having to rely on features of the current metagame. Now, we can see he's getting more and more Reapers here. And this is a situation where the first Reaper, I would say, that was a massive success. 0 losses, he can control the Watchtower, he can keep poking back into his opponent's base throughout the game. But the second Reaper and the third, I'm not sure how much value added that is, at least against Terran. Of course, against Zerg, you can get a lot of good kills. But, I mean, yeah, you can deny the SCV Scout. One Reaper could do that as well. And as soon as your opponent has these Hellions out, anytime you try to jump in their base, all of a sudden you're going to lose some of your retreat ability, as the Hellions are faster than Reapers. So as you see here, when he tries to poke in with the 3 Reapers, all that's going to happen is he's going to see some Hellions. And of course, this Reaper can no longer run away, which is very smart of him to set a single Reaper, because that way he only loses to 1. But it's still probably not much value added past the first one. So I really like the Reaper opening, but I'd stick with just 1 Reaper. You don't need to get a whole lot of these guys. So now the next thing we want to talk about is tools to prevent the Hellion drop. So over here we can see he's getting his Hellions, right? And I'm not sure how effective Hellions are against Hellion drop. He's also getting the Bunker. These are all units that can shoot the Hellbat once they land. But I think that once the Hellbats land, you're already kind of screwed. They're so strong. So I would actually rather have him, let's say this is his base. I'd rather have him do a different defense, right? I think the best way to prevent a Hellion drop with the same buildings he has. He's got the factory and a reactor, and he's got the Vikings. So perhaps he could go here and put a Widow Mine here, right? And then he could put a Widow Mine here. And then he could send his Reapers right? His Reapers will be at the front here, kind of. And the Viking can be right here. And so there's a couple options for the Widow. If the medevac comes in through here, the mine plus the Viking can take it out. Or, of course, if it comes in from here, the same thing. One Viking volley plus the mine will take that medevac out. If it goes right through the center, what you can do, the Viking can shoot at it, and these Widow Mines can come in from the sides. And really, one of them, as long as you're quick at picking them up and repositioning them, you should be able to knock out that medevac as well, no matter which angle it comes from. So I'd like to see that mine Viking defense a little more than the bunker Helling defense, just because it's more proactive, right? This is like, well, I can at least not lose my base once the Hellings drop, but I think you should go over the angle. Don't let the medevac inside my base, because once it gets in there, I'm in kind of big trouble. And that's an option I like more. As you can see here, the Viking is nice, and right here, at this point, if he had that Widow Mine here, he could just bring it back here. Another Widow Mine could come back here, and this medevac would be pinched in, would have no real way that it could get in there, do a lot of damage. As is, it's great to have the Viking, though. That's very important because you can't drive that medevac out. But you know what? Even though you have 2 Hellings and a bunker with a couple Reapers in it, these Battle Hellings have a lot of life. They're not going to go down easily. And, a great SCV pool there. But the problem is that you may not have lost that many SCVs. In fact, actually, he still lost 3. So not that many. But you're still losing a lot of mine time because you had to pull those SCVs out of here. And now, if the medevac was still there, of course, it would pick up the Hellings, drop them on SCVs like we saw, and he'd take even more losses. Without the medevac, the Hellings do much less damage, but you know what? You're still losing a lot of mine time. It's still a successful harass. I think it's really important to take a more, don't even let the medevac get in my base stance. So, I like the Widow Mines a little bit better than the Hellings. But as it is, not a bad way to try to scramble against that type of Widow Mine drop. One of the best ways is what he did is he just ran to SCVs. If you run to SCVs, at least you don't lose them. All right, you lose mine time. You lose a lot of mine time, but you lose infinite mine time if you lose all your SCVs because they're not going to mine for the rest of the game. Right? Think of it that way. So again, the second drop is going to come in here. And this is again where I'd like the Widow Mine more up at the corner. Yes, you can't cover this area, but this is where the Viking is going to kind of hang out. And if you have maybe a Helling out here, you get a little more advanced warning. Another Widow Mine this angle would be great too. As is, though, the Widow Mine is still a great way to defend. The Widow Mine shot combined with the Vikings, as we see here, can knock out that medevac in a single volley. And now the bad news is you splash a lot of your own workers, right? But you know what? Yes, you put splash damage on 5 SCVs. But you didn't kill any of your own SCVs quite yet. And if he drops those Hellbats, then it's worse because the splash damage that mine does is basically 1 Hellbat shot. And if he dropped 2 Hellbats, he'd get at least 2 Hellbat shots off, right? This way he only dropped 2, or he dropped 3. If he dropped 1 more Hellbat, it would have been a Hellbat shot extra. Plus, there's 1 more Hellbat in your base to deal with. So, while the mine wasn't ideal, it's still better than letting that medevac heal and drop more Hellbats. Which is why I think it's a little bit better placed further outside. But as is, if you got to scramble to defend, pull the SCVs as soon as possible. You kill the medevac, you can try to land some Vikings, and your own Hellings can kite and try to work at those Hellbats. Yes, you can't mine, which is why he's staying near the mineral line so the SCVs can't go home. But it's better to not mine than it is to lose all those SCVs. So remember, just retreat those SCVs. And then, again, when it comes in here, you've got to scramble to defend. Unfortunately, this time the Vikings are on the ground. You've got to just make sure that SCVs stay away from those Hellbats and eventually pick them off with, longer-range units that you can kite with. Because the Vikings have longer range, your Hellings have longer range. The Vikings do die, though, so you've got to kite because Hellbats will beat Vikings in a straight-on engagement. And then eventually, once you kill the Hellbats, then you can send SCVs back to work. So it's kind of a multi-way tool of defending. As you can see here, he avoided losing too many SCVs in most of these engagements. But the downside is, of course, he lost so much mining time that while he was busy defending that, his opponent has caught up in expansion timing, and his opponent is just going to keep doing more and more and more Hellbat drops. So I really like the proactive defense, push the Widow Mines out to the corners, get more Vikings, and use those to defend. Because the problem with the reactive defense is at the very least you're pulling SCVs and you're already taking significant damage to this drop. Now, of course, Hellions can be annoying, but they won't do the same damage your opponent's Hellbats will do in your base. Even if you take out that medevac. In fact, this time was an even nicer defense here. It has, oops, let me back it up one more notch here. In this situation right here, when it comes in again, right? You've got the Viking there, and you immediately run those SCVs. The Widowmine shot combined with the Viking, great way to knock out the medevac. Very fast, because the faster you knock out the medevac, the faster you can go ahead and kill these Hellbats. And now with this setup, of course, you can move into your other base, lift the depots, and eventually knock out all these pesky Hellbats. But the problem is that throughout all this, you're still losing mining time, and eventually, again, a great defense, but still losing more mining time. And eventually, because of that, your opponent will eventually get air superiority. And as soon as your opponent gets the air superiority, you have a problem where you're no longer able to kill this medevac because they have 3 Vikings to your 2. As soon as you can't kill that medevac anymore, you're in a checkmate situation because they can just follow all your SCVs with their medevac. Of course, HGG is realizing he's in a lost situation. He can kite with Hellions and avoid the Hellbat shots, but he'll just pick the Hellbats up in the medevac, fly him to the next zone, and keep doing continual damage throughout the game. So, I know this is another section of Hellbat drops, but this one is focusing a little more on things to do better defensively. The one key thing to realize is once the Hellbats dropped into mineral line, they've already paid for themselves. It's that simple, which is why I think Zerg is struggling a little bit with those Hellbat drops, because they don't have an effective way to keep them away from the mineral line. So as soon as they drop in there, you're already playing a losing game, right? At best, you might be able to equalize things. So really the key to defending those is try to get a good screen. And as Terran, you have a really good way to place medevacs, Vikings, make a kind of a screen around your base that's medevac proof. This is important in Wings of Liberty against Hellion drops, against rain drops, but it's way more important in Heart of the Swarm because the Hellbat drop, not only does it kill SCVs faster than the 2 before mentioned drops, but it also is much harder to kill those Hellbats as they are extremely beefy. It's basically the equivalent of a Marauder drop, except that they have a better armor type, because more units do bonus to armor than to light, and they're cheaper than Marauders, and they kill SCVs much, much, much faster. So you've got to really stop the medevac from getting inside your base, or else you're going to be in big trouble. So it wraps up that second map. We're going to take a short break and be on with map number 4 of Innovation vs. TY.